Welcome to No Occasion to Shout, he said, shouting. And we're going to do UBI today, Universal Basic Income. And Robin, it is my understanding that you actually talked to Andrew Yang about this. So maybe we can bring that up. I will just start with my initial thoughts on a Universal Basic Income, just quickly. First off, I think from a liberal's perspective, what they think that it is going to do is wrong. I think that liberals' reasons for wanting a UBI is completely off base, that just giving people money isn't going to help them succeed in life, that they need more of a purpose and a job, and it's more psychological. So from the liberal kind of welfare state, help other people, help your neighbor point of view, I don't agree with the UBI. From a more economic standpoint, however, I completely agree with the UBI, which makes a lot of conservatives think that I'm taking a socialist position or that I'm somehow a liberal on this issue, when I think that a UBI would be great for the fact that businesses will be able to manufacture for a lot less costs. They'll have a lot more money to compete in the market. They'll have their hands on the market more. It will become almost like a game.
Why will costs go down for business? Are you saying because the UBI will supplement income of their workers?
Yes. The automation will be cheaper than hiring employees.
Hold on. Well, you lost me now.
So
why does the UBI make automation cheaper than hiring employees relative to where we are today without the UBI?
Okay, because you can't. I'm making an assumption. Let me point out my assumption.
Okay.
A UBI cannot be implemented, or would not be implemented, without cause and effect or a correlation between automation taking a large amount of jobs. If there's 4% unemployment, the idea of a UBI isn't irrelevant. But if there's 30% unemployment, that's when you would need a UBI, because so many people would be out of work.
Oh, okay. That's a big assumption. And I'm not sure a lot of people who support UBI would buy that.
Okay.
And I'm not sure you need to buy that to defend it. It makes sense. It makes sense. And by the way, have we actually said universal basic income yet in this show? Because I'm wondering if everybody actually knows what UBI stands for.
Universal basic income.
Yeah. Which we should also say is a no questions asked, no strings attached, constant monthly payment to all people in a society. That is what it is. And you mentioned my interview with Andrew Yang. He would set that at $1,000 a month. Person.
Yes. And I take Ben Shapiro does not think that automation will ever replace human jobs, because apparently they've been saying it for a very long time and it never has. I disagree with him. I think automation will take jobs, especially in the driving industry.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a good place to kind of get into the meat of this, because this is one of these false arguments that kind of where each side completely misses the point of the other side and misses the point of the discussion.
Okay.
It is true that people have been saying, this is the candle makers story, right? The story of the candle makers that petitioned the government to block out the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they want to make more candles, right? And then of course the candle makers want to stop electricity too for the same reason, right? Because they're going to be put out of work. It is true that there are jobs that are always being lost by the creation of technologies, and as a result of the same creation of technologies, new jobs that we can't imagine today come into existence. So in a kind of general first order long term equilibrium approximation, jobs are always going to be created. You can't say these jobs are lost and therefore, oh my God, it's a crisis. In the long run, that doesn't make sense. But the point is, surely, that whenever you have let's call it the creative destruction of capitalism, the advance of technology, which creates jobs as well as destroys jobs, there are always transition effects, right? And it's the transition effects which always exist. So they're
Mhm.
always, it's not like one job goes and then the other one pops up in the same place and can be done by the same person. There is always this disruptive time lag that is going to hit certain segments of the population. And certainly a lot of the white working class workers that Andrew Yang talks about, right, that he says are responsible for putting Trump into office. You know, they right now may be more affected by these advances than other segments of the population, and that
Yes.
has big political and economic consequences. So to say that it's this long-term reality or that long-term reality misses the pertinent reality, which is there's always transitions between these two states, and the transitions are themselves permanent states with different
Yes.
people going into and out of that transition state.
And that's what I would say to Ben Shapiro if I was talking to Ben Shapiro, is that the UBI at this stage in 2019, where we're at in this stage, is going to prevent prevent the major consequences of what might be a large recession due to the transition effect of jobs.
Well, I think that's a big assumption there, right? Because whether the degree of this churn, this creative destruction, and the time for it to play out to our economy and society is greater than it always has been, is also not known. I mean, there are good arguments for it. I see why Andrew Yang thinks for example, thinks that it is going to be bigger now than it's always been, because he's looking at the technologies that are coming down the pipe. And he's got some good empirical evidence for that. But I do think, when we're making these huge statements about, huge general statements about millions of lives, under conditions of so many variables, we don't even know what they all are, let alone able to evaluate them. We are in danger of being wrong on that factual claim. I mean, I'm not saying it is wrong. I don't know, but I just want to raise that flag, right?
What was the cause of the Great Depression?
Well, scholars argue this till the cows come home, right? And their ideological bent tends to inform those scholars. And I'm not a scholar of the Great Depression. So I would be wary to speak with any authority on that. I might have some ideas about it, but I'm not going to give you a definitive answer. But I'm interested to ask you your answer, because you asked the question and you did it for a reason.
The economy naturally goes through periods of recessions, going up and down, based on a variety of a variety of factors. One of which is in investments and investing, and how companies pull money in and out of the economy, and how long they keep it in and when they take it out to spend it. But I think one of the major causes...
Hold on, that doesn't make sense. You can't take money out of an economy to spend it. You're spending it, you're acting in the economy.
Investing. The way that businesses invest, I meant.
Okay, so you're talking about spending investment dollars in a kind of a consumer or operations fashion rather than capital investments.
Yes.
Talking about those two. Okay.
So I think that there's a variety of factors that go into those things, and you couldn't say it was one thing. But I also think that the way that the economy dips up and down, those variety of factors, regardless of what they are, there's an argument to be made that a UBI might be able to mitigate those effects.
Okay, so what we're saying here is that a UBI is, you could say, a smoothing, it provides a smoothing of economic cycles, which is kind of de facto counter-cyclical, right? Yeah?
Yeah.
You could say that. Now, of course, somebody that was going to say, no, we don't want to go down this road of UBI because that is more of what ails us. They could make the argument that, look, people who are being thrown out of a job because of this kind of churn and technological advance, this creative destruction, we already have unemployment for them. That kicks in. We already have welfare programs for the poor. So it's not like we don't have this covered. And they would be right on that, right? So then I think surely if you're going to make an argument for out of principle for the UBI, you have to then draw a distinction between UBI and these other things that we have in place right now to do the job that you're claiming it would do, and say this is why UBI is more favorable, which actually I think is if you are a UBI proponent, is how you want to do it. Because the one way I think you can get, and this goes very much to Andrew Yang's point about the UBI, that you can get, let's say, non-progressives on board with it, is if there's $1,000 to be spent for, let's say, me when I'm poor and unemployed, I'd rather have me spending it than the government, right? And a lot of conservatives would say yes to that. A lot of libertarians would say that yes to that, although they might object on principle to UBI, of course. But the idea that the UBI can reduce government decision-making and interference in lives, and of course, by putting it straight in the hands of the people, rather than having the people go through all of these government programs, that's also much more efficient, right? You haven't got all the destruction of value that you have when the government tries to, pick and choose where this dollar goes and that dollar goes.
Yes. Well, my main reason why I like it, which is before I was making the arguments for the mitigating of the economy, I'm not exactly sure on that. I just know that that's what Elon Musk and Andrew Yang types are saying. And I think there might be some credibility. Regardless, the reason I like the idea of the UBI is because I don't think it would help the poor or help people without jobs that much. I think inflation would rise to combat any money that they were getting for free and spending. I think whom it most helps is people who are spending the money on capital or using it to create more jobs. So exactly like the government.
I'm confused. We're talking about we're talking about only $1,000 a person, nothing for companies, for individuals per month.
Yes.
So there's no money that's not going to make a significant impact on the spending of companies, unless you are saying again that it's indirectly through the reduced salaries that then can be diverted elsewhere. But then that kind of defeats the object of it. I mean, if that's what it does, then that's an argument against UBI is ineffective.
I'm saying that individuals, if they are already, let's say there's teachers and construction workers, and there's a bunch of individuals who have enough money already. So right now, welfare gives money to primarily people who need it. What happens when you give people money who don't need it? Now they have extra disposable income. And I think with that extra disposable income, what they are likely to do with that is invest in capital, create businesses, create jobs, do things creatively.
Okay, so hold on, but let's say, so the average, let's say lower middle class, working class person, but with a stable job, let's say with a family, you give them an extra $1,000 a month. Like, that's not going to make the difference, is it? Between the business idea they always wanted to do and implementing it and not doing it. I mean, surely what they're going to do with that is it's going to be basically spent, it's going to be consumer spending, isn't it? It's going to create jobs indirectly. They'll buy more stuff to make their family life easier, but they're not going to go and set up a business in the main.
I'm not sure. I think there's a variety of different avenues that people could take, and there's a lot of different variables. But I know that Tesla, for example, if Tesla would have gotten $1,000 a month for life, I'm pretty sure
Tesla's not a person. Or do you mean Tesla the person? Are we talking
Nikola Tesla?
Okay. So you are talking about this is a historical.
I'm talking about Tesla.
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay.
I'm saying this is one variable out of
yes. Okay. I'm with you.
That's what I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to so many of the incountable variables that it's almost one of these things is likely to happen because there are.
So let's draw this distinction between Tesla. No. Okay. I'm with you. So let's draw the distinction between what I said and what you said, because both can be true at the same time, right?
Okay, it is.
I think what we're saying is, there are a minority of individuals, and I like that you chose Tesla, who who are so creative, who are thinkers, who are inventors, the Isaac Newtons of this world, who could spend more time sitting under the tree waiting for the apple to drop on their head and come up with gravity, right? So yes, if you give a society, I don't know, whatever that is, 150 million Americans $1,000 a month, maybe a million of them will do something like that. Maybe 100,000, maybe 10,000. And you might say, and I think this maybe is what you're saying, and that would be, and the impact of that 10,000, 100,000 million people who are going to do something with it is going to be significant for all of society. And that justifies it. And whilst recognizing that alongside 99% of the recipients are just going to have an easier life.
Yes. And also, so there's that component, the geniuses, Nikola Teslas of the world. I'm sorry?
But you mentioned inflation, so we should come back to that. But finish your thought.
And then there's also a small subsection of people in lower middle class who probably, I would argue at least 5% of every like teacher, construction worker, policeman, at least 5% of them would use that money to create capital or create jobs. I think that giving $1,000 a month to people, there are going to be people who are going to, from not just businesses, but I feel like they're going to create jobs. There's going to be job creation. I don't know how much, but
the people, you said 5% of people in work. I think we've already got evidence against that.
Okay, what's the evidence?
Which is that, let's say I'm in work on a salary of, I don't know, let's say $40,000 it's kind of a median salary a year. And my salary goes up to 50,000, which it is likely to do if I stay in my job for a few years.
Okay.
What fraction of people who have that experience, which is most people in conventional working America over time, end up going out and creating a job? I don't think.
Also, the lottery argument too. Now that I'm thinking about it, most people who win the lottery end up going bankrupt within a few years. So,
I mean, I guess what we're saying is it doesn't change behaviors.
You're right.
I mean, that's, or maybe it will, but in 0.05% of people rather than 5% of people. Whatever.
Okay.
I mean, one thing though I like about it that comes from, I guess, my personality is that, there's studies now on how being poor causes people to make poorer decisions, right? It has health impacts, et cetera, et cetera. Now, for me, $1,000 a month would actually make a huge difference. And one of the reasons is that I live lean and cheap, and I don't need a lot of stuff. I don't like a lot of stuff. For $1,000 a month, like literally, I could go and fly and see my family every single month, right, of the year for that, back in England, right? That for someone that's more frugal, that's more responsible, that looks to their future, that saves for a rainy day, that has a greater benefit than for somebody who doesn't, who wastes it. And if by having a UBI, it stops us having at any given time to create the moral hazard of looking at who needs to be bailed out and then bailing them out, because let's say they ran up credit card debt, they lived beyond their means. We know everybody, is taken care of with the UBI. So as a society, we stop doing that. That stops being okay. In other words, we stop having the knee-jerk statist reaction of, okay, here's a group of people with a problem. We don't know how they got into it. Maybe it was their own fault, but we can't stand by and let it happen, right? So we're going to throw money at it, and therefore we're going to incentivize the very problem that we want to help bail people out of. If a UBI can deal with that, then, that I think might be, I'm not making the case for it, I'm just thinking through it. That might be a very positive impact on what is acceptable in what we use government to do to society and other people, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like it takes away the excuse to be, to say I need help, right?
That's true.
To say bail me out. No, you got pre-bailed. Everybody got pre-bailed.
That's true.
Um,
No more excuses.
no more excuses, and I
But
like
there will
that a
be
lot.
more
That's
excuses.
my personality.
There will be
Well,
more excuses.
well, and therein, I think, is the rub. And when I was interviewed Andrew Yang, I said, I kind of pushed on, this is a much more interesting proposal to me if the legislation that introduces it takes away, let's say, about the same amount of government spending that is distributed through an inefficient welfare state where the government is making.
Oh, I would completely agree with that.
Yeah. So
That's kind of what I assumed would happen.
and I didn't get a robust answer to that from Andrew Yang. He obviously likes the idea of that. Like, I think he likes it in principle, but I don't know that he would actually die on that hill. And and frankly, if anybody's going to say, you know what, we'll just leave well, I'll tell you one thing he did say about, I think this is right, I think I'm recording this right, about how he would roll it out or maybe roll it into American society, is he would give people, I think he said this, but check it, who are on welfare, the option to get off all of the programs they're on and take the $1,000 UBI, which I think makes economic sense for them. I think basically everybody would get, or most people on welfare would get more money doing that. So, that's, yeah, okay, that might do the trick. It's an interesting one. I mean, it's an interesting one.
And then going back to inflation, the money isn't, I like to think of it almost as like a business loan that's being given out if there was a UBI, because it's not based on labor. It's not connected to the GDP in any way. So if more capital and more jobs and more labor aren't created as an indirect result of the money, then there is going to be inflation costs. Correct?
Well, he talks about this, and this one is super complicated because yes, what you say is true as far as it goes, but the variables that determine inflation are so many and interrelated that it's kind of like you've got an equation with 100 inputs and you're talking about changing, one, or let's say 10, right?
But here's the thing, though, the largest increase you would imagine is going to be an increase in demand, because there's so many more people spending money that they have. So the increase in demand is going to cause a shift in supply and demand.
But this also goes to, what isn't the government spending that money on to pay the UBI? I mean, it comes back to that point.
You're right. That is true.
Right. So I mean, it's clearly an issue. I mean, if the government just started literally spending an extra $1,000 per person effectively, right? I mean, let's say they just increased the deficit by $1,000 per, working age American, by giving that money back. Yeah, I mean, we know the consequences of that without a doubt. I would say. One of the things, though, that I think is one of the most interesting aspects of the proposal, that I think is also one of the most missed, is that there are many people doing many things of societal and economic value for free, and society would actually save money if they did more of it, but they can't because they're not getting paid to do it. One of the obvious examples is caring for a sick relative. Now, this goes on all over the world. I mean, I think my uncle, for example, back in rural England, spends a lot of time taking care of his mother, my grandmother. Now, the work that he does, he could do more of it if he was getting some kind of income for that. As it is, money is being spent on carers that I'm sure are doing a worse job than my grandmother's own son. No, well, they're doing a different job. I'm not going to say a worse job. They're great people. But there are certain things that, wives with staying with husbands who, let's say, have, I don't know, Alzheimer's or whatever it may be, right? to enable them better to do that without the great human struggle that they have. But by keeping, let's say, that husband literally off the street, when, let's say, in Seattle, to use an example, each homeless person costs the city 16 point something thousand dollars a year, right? The UBI would actually be cheaper, right, for all of the taxpayers than what we would be paying for the guy who might be made homeless if he didn't have the UBI. Now, I'm not saying that is always the case, but it's an argument that I think, whether you put your hat on conservative principles or liberal ones, starting with from where we are today, you would favor the UBI, right? Now, not in some kind of ideological utopia, not if you were starting society from scratch, but if that goes then back to, are we interested in direction in politics or destination?
That's true.
And politics is always directional. It's never destination.
What areas did you disagree with Yang on? Was there any debate there?
Yeah, no, I do disagree with. I mean, I'm glad you asked me that question, actually, because
I know you definitely disagree with him on a bunch of stuff, because I do too. But I'm wondering, when you talked to him, did those topics come up?
Well, what I do as an interviewer, I'm very friendly and I give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and I try and respond to them on their own terms to kind of draw them out, and then I ask them questions in response to what they're giving me to take them to places that they maybe haven't thought about. And interestingly, a lot of comments. I've never had so many comments on a video, at this Andrew Yang video. I mean, we're in the hundreds now. And one of the comments that I got quite a lot of was that these were deep and challenging questions, which was kind of interesting because they were, they certainly weren't gotcha questions. And I was super friendly. And I don't think he would know where I might disagree with him on policy from the questions I was asking. Like, I wasn't coming at him in any kind of a conflictual way. He is one of the areas I got a big issue with him on, and I did broach it, but again, we didn't have time to go into depth. I will hopefully go into more depth in a later interview with him. Was he seems to be for full-on single-payer healthcare, and I come from Britain. I come from where we have the NHS, the second biggest employer in the world, by the way, second only to the People's Army in the Republic of China, the People's Republic of China, right. Mainland China, not Taiwan. Now, the NHS, biggest employer in the world, we have a massive problem of moral hazard in healthcare in the UK, which massively drives up costs. Now, it doesn't drive, in other words, people, abuse the system at the low end, right? Because, well, you know why. We don't need to rehash all those economic arguments here. However, I did say, and I have said this in a few places, including in some of the most libertarian circles I'm in, that if I have to choose, right, between the only options was the American system as it now is and the British single-payer system as it now is, I would take the latter, right? However, I would not ever advocate going to the latter. If you're going to change the American system, you don't go to that system. What you do is you have a free market at the non-catastrophic part of healthcare, which is 90% of healthcare is non-catastrophic, right? If you're gonna socialize it, which is what Andrew Yang wants to do, he didn't use that word, but I'm going to use that word because it's true. You socialize the catastrophic healthcare because there's no moral hazard in it, in the sense that nobody says, well, I really want to get cancer because then the government's going to pay for my treatment. I'm going to stand in front of a bus because if I get my leg gets broken when it runs over me, the government's going to heal it. Nobody will do that, right? So, and I pointed out to Andrew Yang, who is an entrepreneur. I mean, he seems to be a capitalist in many of the good ways. We don't socialize grocery distribution and production, thank God, right? Because otherwise we'd be the Soviet Union. Why on earth would we do it for basic healthcare? I don't think we should. I want to see. There are Walmarts now, right, where you can get healthcare at Walmart. I think that's what we want. Basic healthcare should be in Walmart, and etc. And all the issues about pricing of healthcare and get the government. I mean, it's been so corrupted by government and the skewed incentives, right? With the employer buying healthcare and all that. We know all of that. Those arguments have been rehashed many times. So I wouldn't do that. I mean, I wouldn't do that. And I am seriously interested in the UBI if it's on the condition of getting the government out of a load of things that we could use it to get it out of. Another thing I had a big problem with, as you know, I am a non-interventionist in foreign policy. I mean, not a never say never. I'm not saying you always stand by if you see a genocide, but in most cases, in nearly every case, if you intervene, you make things worse. I was against the Iraq War. I was full on a peace ticket back in 2011, 2012. So I've written anti-war articles. I'm that guy. But I was not satisfied with his answer to the problem of China.
Yeah, foreign policy, as far as I can tell, doesn't seem like he's put much thought into it.
And also, I don't think he's sufficiently shocked for the Orwellian nature of China and what it's becoming.
Yes. Part of me feels as if he is catering to a Democratic base because he's running as a Democrat. Because some of the things he says, he uses a lot of buzzwords that I would normally not think an intellectual would use that cater to a Democratic base. So I'm wondering if he is really just trying to get up into butter up Democrats until he gets into a debate format.
No, I'm going to give him more credit than that. I mean, check out the interview. One of the things I liked about him, and I told him this on the interview, is that he's clearly not an ideologue, right? A lot of what he wants to talk most about are not from the same old menu of Democratic or either party politics, right? He's obviously done his own thinking, and he seems to be an empiricist. I said that to him. And I don't mean that means that he's right on everything, right? That because all of his things are based on fact, he must be right, or that his facts aren't disputable. But it seems to me that that's his approach to the world. As an entrepreneur, he seems to me that he's trying to look at the world as it is, look at problems as they are, and then find practical solutions. And he's more interested in, solutions geared to actually work in a timely fashion, right? And I think that's kind of good, right? I mean, I'm kind of an empiricist too, right? So I kind of like that. It's that Yogi Berra quote that I like when I'm talking about political ideology, that in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. And I think he kind of gets that instinctively. That's why I think some of his thinking is relatively original for our current political landscape. And it's a corrective to everything that's wrong with our political landscape, which is that it is ideological, it is partisan, and if he's tapping into anything, it's the thing I want people to be tapping into, which is the fact that 70% of Americans are completely disaffected at the banal, predictable ideological way we're doing politics, right? I mean, I believe in principle. I mean, I think there are principles in politics you have to fight and die for, but that doesn't mean our principles should just be dressed up as the same old partisan ideological one-line. And I think that's why he's getting quite a lot of positive attention. I tell you one thing, it was amazing. Not only are people giving comments saying they support him and they are libertarians or Ron Paul supporter, or that I was a Ron Paul supporter in 2012, this comments on the video, but now Andrew Yang has my vote. Now, I think that is a massive ideological leap, I've got to say. But tellingly, the last time I looked at the video on YouTube, it had only 2 dislikes and 200 and something likes. Now, that's kind of unusual for an overtly political interview. Unusual. So that tells me something. I'm not quite sure what, but something.
Well, that's the time we have. Be sure to check out Robin's interview with Andrew Yang, and you're doing another one?
Well, I left it with him that we would do another one in the future as the campaign gets going. I'm going to start reaching out to other candidates, I think, because the feedback I got on that one was so phenomenal.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, why not, eh? Yeah.
All right, so tell us in the comments, do you think libertarianism is compatible with a UBI, or are you Brian Kaplan? Thanks for liking, watching, and subscribing.
Thank you, guys. And I will talk to you soon once again, Austin. Take care.